Now imagine that teacher could reach not 30 kids in a classroom, but millions of students all over the world. That's exactly what Sal Khan is doing on his website, Khan Academy. With digital lessons and simple exercises, he's determined to transform how we learn at every level. One of his most famous pupils, Bill Gates, says Khan, this teacher to the world, is giving us all a glimpse of the future of education. It all started in 2004, when Sal Khan was working as a hedge fund analyst in Boston, and his cousin Nadia, a 7th grader in New Orleans, was struggling with algebra. He agreed to tutor her remotely and wound up posting lessons on YouTube. They helped Nadia, but then an odd thing happened. Total strangers started using them too.
I started getting feedback like, you know, my child has dyslexia and this is the only thing that's getting into him. I got letters from people saying, you know, we're praying for you and your family. That's pretty heady stuff. You know, people don't say that type of stuff to a hedge fund analyst normally.
So in 2009, Khan quit his job and, working from a desk set up in his closet, devoted himself full-time to Khan Academy. It's a non-profit with a simple but audacious mission: to provide a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. If that goal sounds far-fetched for a guy working in his closet, consider what happened next.
There's a website that I've just been using with my kids recently called Khan Academy, K-H-A-N. Just one guy doing some unbelievable 15-minute tutorials.
I was like, those videos for Nadia, not Bill Gates. I have to take a second look at some of this stuff.
That's right. Bill Gates, one of the smartest and richest men in the world, was using Sal Khan's free videos to teach his own kids. That was just 2 years ago. Today, with the help of more than $15 million in funding, much of it from the Gates Foundation and Google.
So if we get rid of the percent sign, we move the decimal over.
He's amassed a library of math lectures.
12 plus 4 is 16.
Starting with basic addition and building all the way through advanced calculus.
We're taking the limit as delta x approaches 0. It's the exact same thing.
But he's not just a math whiz. He has this uncanny ability to break down even the most complicated subjects, including physics, biology, astronomy, history, medicine. In just a couple of years, he's gone from having a few hundred pupils to more than 4 million every month. Has it sunk in to you that you are probably the most watched teacher in the world now?
Yeah, I try not to say things like that to myself. You don't want to think about it too much because it can, I think, paralyze you a little bit.
Khan has been able to hire, with competitive salaries, some of the most talented engineers and designers in the country. The Khan Academy office has the intense vibe of a Silicon Valley startup. The team is working to create software they hope will transform how math is taught in American classrooms. Khan Academy has created a dashboard so teachers like Courtney Cadwell can monitor each student's progress.
So right now they're all working on things and you can see that real time.
Yes.
So as you sit here and look at the dashboard, you see how the students are doing individually, you see how they're doing as a whole class, and you can figure out who you need to help.
Exactly, and here I can track their progress over time. I can see who's rushing ahead, who's lagging behind. I can see if they begin to stagnate.
A blue bar indicates a student knows a concept. Orange, they're still working on it. But if a red bar pops up,
is kind of the red flag to tell me, hey, it's time to step in and intervene. And I can see...
Oh, so you can see not only that it's red, but specifically what the problem is.
What they missed, and you can see the number of seconds they spent on each problem.
Eric Schmidt, the pioneering chairman of Google, says he's seen a lot of failed attempts to integrate technology into education, but says what Sal Khan is doing is different.
Many people think they're doing something new, but they're not really changing the approach. Whereas with Saul, he said, what we're going to do is not only are we going to make these interesting 10-minute videos, but we're going to measure whether it works or not.
He was the guy to sort of make this happen? Why do you think it was him and not some person who was an educator or who had a background in this area?
Innovation never comes from the established institutions. It's always a graduate student or a crazy person or somebody with a great vision. Saul is that person in education, in my view.
But no matter how big or how successful Khan Academy gets, Sal Khan promises he'll never put a price tag on it.
The for-profits have to mold themselves much more to the education establishment than we do. As a not-for-profit, we're just like, what's our mission? To educate children as well as possible. I've said it enough times, and it's in our mission statement, a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere.
So,
So Saul, it's a real privilege to have you online. I hope the Skype is going to work all fine. I think, you know, we've just seen something quite amazing. And, you know, personally, I'm both a social entrepreneur and a scientist and an educator. And I think that what you've achieved is absolutely amazing. There's millions of kids that are benefiting from what you've done, including my own kids, and I'm sure, you know, many others, including Bill Gates, as we've just heard. But the question is, how do you change the education system from there? Okay, how do you convince teachers to use it? I know you've started to do this. Can you tell us a little more about the way you're doing it? And can you tell us also about the limiting factors that you see in this technology, and how do you wish to overcome them, and, you know, maybe bringing it into the classroom or building your own schools?
Yeah, you know, it's been an interesting journey for me, and you could tell from that piece that, you know, a lot of this wasn't the way that I expected it to happen. In fact, you know, if you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have assumed that I would still be an analyst at an investment firm. And what seems to have worked for us so far has been just being really focused on what does a learner need. So I started with my cousins, and by tutoring them, I started to see what did they have gaps in. Boy, they needed more practice on things. As a tutor, what tools did I need? And I tried to make those. And then once then I started making videos just as an attempt to help my cousins. Then when we got our first funding, it was really to get software engineers and content experts and researchers to make the software even better. And that's when some schools actually reached out and they said, well, how would you use this in the classroom? And we said, well, we think every student can now learn at their own pace. They can master concepts before moving on. We can give a teacher a dashboard so that he or she can see exactly what students need help in what, so they can personalize things. And so what's been surprising for me, and I think for an entire team, is it's very easy to become cynical about education. You know, I think in every country we've encountered, you know, it seems like this very monolithic thing that's hard to change. But what we found, and it's still very early days for us as an organization. I think it's early days for, you know, this kind of movement, whatever you'd want to call it, blended learning, personalized education. But we're seeing there's a lot of demand coming directly from the teachers, demand coming directly from the students, demand coming directly from parents. And so, so far, that has been what's stimulating a lot of our growth. We're reaching about 10 million students right now. Most of them are outside of formal classrooms, but a good million of them are inside formal classrooms. There's about 30,000 classrooms around the world using Khan Academy. And our view is, as long as we stay focused, we have teachers part of our design process, we have students, parents, we have, and we're measuring, is it really helping the students learn? And over the next, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think if in one direction we make a good content, we give it away for free, people know that that's our mission. And on the other side, we really try to introduce this idea that learning should be personalized. Learning should be about mastering concepts and then moving on. A classroom should not be about a lecture. A classroom should be about interacting with your peers or having a more focused interaction with your teacher. And so I think in parallel, as these things happen, hopefully over the next 5-10 years, these ideas would become more mainstream.
So can you tell us more about the research results on the efficiency of, you know, the way it changes the learning path of the students? I know a few anecdotes, but do you know of a good research project that have tested the efficiency of your techniques?
Yeah, and I'll cite a few in a few seconds, but the one thing I'll emphasize before I even give that data is, we see, especially in a classroom, we see ourselves as a tool for the teacher. And so when we cite the data, it's at least as much or more of the credit of the teacher than it is for us. We're just the tool that's facilitating the results that the teacher is getting out of the classroom. But there's a classroom here in California. It's in Oakland, California. This is a very underserved, it's a poor area. This classroom, 9th grade algebra classroom, it was in the 7th percentile in California. So that means that 93% of California 9th grade algebra classrooms are doing better than this classroom. So it was in a very bad situation. And then within 2 years, they've gone from the 7th percentile to the 98th percentile. And I give a lot of credit to their teacher, Peter McIntosh. But what he said, what it's enabled is the students used to be very passive. They might be in 9th grade, but a lot of them had trouble with basic arithmetic. Some of them didn't know their multiplication tables. And in a traditional model, it was very hard to address these gaps in the student's knowledge in 9th grade. It was very hard to address, to cater to every student when every student is at different skill levels. And so this teacher was able to successfully, and there's an art to this, was successfully able to use us as a tool to really make the classroom a personalized experience. That teacher sits down next to each student. That teacher sets goals for each student. That teacher encourages students to tutor and mentor their peers. And so the combined effect, where the tool and then the teacher is doing all of these other things, showed dramatic gains, things that frankly people hadn't seen before. Even in Los Altos, which is a more well-off community, very close, it's kind of the heart of Silicon Valley. Once again, you know, across the board improvement, and what made the district feel good about it was the remedial classes, the classes where the students were having trouble in math. These were where we saw the biggest gains. And, you know, at the high end of the remedial class, so these were kids who were diagnosed or, you know, said, look, you're not good at math. Some of the kids actually became advanced, so they had never seen that in a remedial class. And even the kids that were furthest behind, who for many years just never progressed, saw a fairly dramatic increase. We have a third-party evaluation being done by SRI. That data is going to be coming out very soon, but the narrative of it is time spent on Khan Academy correlated very well, very closely with student outperformance. So obviously you would expect a student who's good to spend more time and then continue to do good. But if you and I came in at the same level, if you spent more of your time doing more of this personalized learning, you had a better outcome. So it's still early days. You know, I don't want to make it sound like this is a silver bullet that you can just drop in. But a lot of these underlying ideas that if you personalize things, you know, anecdotally, once you personalize things, I think the classroom and learning becomes more fun for everyone, for the students, for the teachers, but also the data is starting to speak to this, not just being a nice thing that maybe improves things 1 or 2%, but actually could have fairly dramatic results.
And that's really nice. I mean, I was really waiting for such result. I love it. The next question for me would be how to extract what you describe as the art of this fantastic teacher in being empowered by the tools you have provided him and the kids to be able to achieve so much. So how can we extract that art and, you know, help other teachers to learn from, you know, such a, you know, maestro of teaching and using your tools, and you know, how can we maybe use the technology again, maybe MOOCs for teachers, or I don't know, maybe there will be a Khan Academy for teachers themselves, so they would be learning how to teach using your tools. I don't know, how do you see this sort of future?
Yeah, it's an open question for us. I mean, we're kind of trying everything that you just described. You know, when we find these teachers that are doing incredible work, we send film crews over. Other NGOs or foundations are filming them, interviewing them. We're trying to document what their practices are. The underlying theme behind all of the teachers that we've seen really good things happen is that these teachers, I think, recognize that the most powerful learning experience happens for students when to some degree the teacher says, oh, I'm not the center of the classroom anymore, I'm here to support the students, and spends all of his or her time doing direct interventions with students, having direct conversations with students, rather than lecturing for the entire classroom. And there are teachers that, you know, have been doing this for a long time, you know, even before Khan Academy. I spoke to a group that works with a lot of teachers, and I asked them, who are the best teachers, or, you know, what do you see? Is there a common thread amongst the best teachers? And she told me that, you know, a lot of people think that the best lecturers, because that's what we imagine when we think of a teacher, a good lecturer. And she says that's nice, but those aren't the teachers that move the dial the most. It's also not necessarily the teachers with a PhD or whatever else. She said the teachers that move the dial the most are the ones that form real bonds with students, have real conversations with students on a one-on-one basis, and are good at changing the mindset of the student. Changing the mindset, if you can convince a student to care, if you can convince a student that they need to take ownership of their learning because it's their future and the teacher is there just to help, then the other stuff starts to fall into place. No matter how good you try to teach the quadratic formula, if the student's mindset isn't there, it's going to be very, very difficult. So To your question, we're going to try all of the above. We're still at the early stages. We're trying to document this as well as possible. Eventually, we want to have examples like teachers like this in every city in the world, so that if a teacher is interested, they could visit those classrooms. We want to create communities of teachers. This is another thing. I think anywhere you go in the world, teaching is actually a very isolated profession. You're by yourself with a class of 25, 30 students. You don't get necessarily the same camaraderie that a lot of us get in our professions. So we also hope to connect students, teachers, so that they can come up with their own best practices. This is the other thing I want to stress is there's no one solution for any teacher. Every teacher's different. Every students are different. They all have different situations. But we want to start at least celebrating some of the best work that we've seen.
Well, that's fantastic. I really like this. I think another dimensions that separates at least different countries in their abilities to help students to learn is very often the attitudes of the teachers when they see a child failing, whether they think that, it has to be the child's fault. Okay, this is very common in France. And you have a position in other countries that succeed much better that says, well, maybe I should try to teach this concept differently. And I think what you're providing is a different way to teach the same concept, and that can certainly help. But it's apparently very true that the teachers that are among the best are actually scientists within their classrooms. They are very good at observing kids that have different needs and at providing them with different things, and they test and they see whether it works or not. And I'm sure that those that see that what you provide works, then they keep refining the way they're using it, and therefore keep improving it. But in the same time, the question would be first how to make this available to as many people as possible. And I know you're launching this in French, so maybe we want to talk about this for the audience we have here, but also maybe alternatives. Okay, how many Khan academies will we have in the future? Would we have diversity? Would you encourage other people to provide videos on your platform? How do you see that future?
Yeah, so, the general question of how do we get as many people to access this as possible, this is something we think about every day. Obviously, we're trying to make it as free. It is free. Everything, the teacher tools, everything, it's all available for free. As you mentioned, we're internationalizing it. We just launched the Spanish Khan Academy 3 weeks ago. Brazilian Portuguese is next. French, Russian, Arabic, Hindi, Mandarin are shortly after. I would expect in the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to see a fully, in all of these languages. And it's not just videos. A big part of Khan Academy, this is something I stress, because the story of Khan Academy really grew because of the popularity of the videos. People associate still us sometimes as a video site. But I stress that, most of on the other side of that wall, there's 50 engineers here, and they're working on the interactive part of the site. And in a classroom, we see that as the real focal point of where the learning happens. The learning happens as students do exercises, get feedback, their teachers, their peers can see if someone's struggling and then intervene, and the videos are there really as a supplement of the main problem solving. But with that said, we have a long way to go. Even in the developed world, in France, the United States, and Great Britain, about 70% of people have access to the internet. So, and that's that 30% who are in most need of these type of resources. So, I hope this is something that we aren't big enough to tackle directly. The cost of the technology is coming down exponentially, thankfully. Broadband's getting cheaper. In a few years, a television set will essentially be a computer. It'll, your TV signal will come on the internet as well. So I'm hoping it's not going to solve the problem in the developed world tomorrow, but in 5-6 years, that 70% number is going to be 80%, 90%, and in 10 years, it'll be close to 100%. The rest of the world is the opposite. Only 30% have access to the internet. And so we really have to think about how does that change? And once again, that's something where we're kind of relying on other folks to address the problem. And there's a lot of interesting experiments. There are a lot of developing countries that are setting up Wi-Fi or WiMAX grids. And obviously the technology is getting cheaper. Cellular, mobile might be part of it. Those are getting much more penetrated than computers or traditional computers and the internet. So you know, I wish I could say tomorrow we would have this problem solved, but I think it's going to take at least 5 years in the developed world for it to be really addressed, and 10 years or so in the developing world. In terms of other Khan Academies or other content creators, absolutely. Even today, you know, I still do a lot of the math and science, but we have other folks doing it. We have art historians making the content. This is in English. Obviously, when we do it in other languages, there's different levels of translation. You could subtitle it, you could redub the videos, or you could you can redo them completely. So when we work with the Carlos Slim Foundation in Mexico, they have math teachers who are looking at what I did, say, oh, I could do that, and they redo it. So it is different teachers. And another thing that we're doing is on the actual content itself, which is I view as more important than even the videos. We're collaborating with educators around the world and you know, people at some of the best colleges, some of the best high schools, to make sure that that is at a very high standard, the same standard that they would apply to their own students. So once again, early days, but we our goal, our mission, just is it's not about videos, not about exercises, it's not about me. Our mission is about how do we deliver the best possible interactive learning experience to as many people as possible? How do we make the best tools for teachers so that they can move in a direction of personalized learning? And how can we change the conversation as a whole so that this becomes more mainstream?
Fantastic. I have one more question on the way the children themselves are using it. Do they use it and interact with one another? Can you tell us more about this? Because very often, you know, there is no adults around. Either there is no teacher or there is no parents. But the kids, are they alone watching the video, or what happens when there is a collective of kids? I mean, you know, of course, of the hole in the wall experiments. Are that type of kids using your courses, and what do they do with them?
Yeah, so, you know, this is something that we need to do more research on. As I said, the bulk of our users are doing it informally. I think some of the users are someone, you know, maybe they have a calculus exam tomorrow on a derivative and they didn't understand what was going on in their classroom, so someone told them, hey, Khan Academy might help you. They go and they search for that. They do some exercises, maybe watch a video or two and say, oh, maybe that helped, and then they go take the exam. So that we have a lot of users like that. It's very transactional. But we also have a lot of users who say no. And, you know, some of them are homeschooling students. Some of them are on independent study. Some of them are doing it in parallel with their other classroom because maybe this form factor is working for them better. Or they do start, you know, at basic arithmetic or whatever, and they keep learning in a progression until they get to algebra or trigonometry or physics or whatever they desire to learn. And you know, I would say some of them are probably doing it, you know, the same way when I was a kid. If I wanted to learn something that wasn't happening in my school, I would find a textbook and I would just try to read the textbook and do the problems. I'm sure that a lot of students are doing it that way, but a lot of students are also, hopefully, and we're trying to track this more, doing it as part of a community. And actually, this is an interesting area. We're starting to talk to libraries. You know, libraries have a very similar mission to us, to disseminate the world's knowledge for free. Obviously, most libraries came about roughly, you know, 150 years ago, where the technology was, well, let's make a physical location, allow people to borrow books. What's interesting now is obviously, you know, physical books, you know, things are happening, but we view ourselves as information, knowledge, feedback that is best used in a community. So best used when students are together, they can answer each other's questions, they can celebrate successes, they can mentor each other, and libraries are a place where they are looking for what do they become as they, you know, in the decades ahead. And so we're having some very interesting conversations with some library systems because it could be a very good match. They could be a place where kids could learn math, form a community, have friends, etc. After school programs or another place where we think we can do a lot, summer programs. But obviously the school setting is the most interesting, but it'll probably take the longest.
Yeah, and by the way, the French people that are the most active in translating the Khan Academy, as you know, are Library Without Borders, okay, Bibliothèques Sans Frontières for the French in the room. And so clearly, you know, they are completely aligned with what you just say. I will have to have a quick 1-minute question answer for you. How do you see MOOCs and the way, do you think MOOCs are the same as Khan Academy, or do you think pedagogically they are different, or they're just targeting different age group?
So I think at a very high level, our missions are similar, is that we want to take knowledge that was previously inaccessible and bring it to as many people as possible. I think in how we're addressing things, there are differences. a MOOC is, it's in the name. It's a massively open online course. They're taking a course, usually from a prestigious university, say it's freshman physics, and they're mapping it to the virtual. So a university course starts on a certain date. It lasts, whatever, 15, 18 weeks. It has problem sets, exams, and everyone goes together at a set pace, and some of them pass it, some of them fail it, and that's the end of it. And MOOCs they're transplanting that same model. You can go register for a MOOC the same way you would register for a class. You start on a certain date. It goes at a certain pace, sometimes a very fast pace, and then some kids pass it, some kids fail it. We want to view it in a different way. We want kids to be able to access the whenever they want to. We want it to go at their own pace. We don't, as soon as you make the pace go, some kids are going to fall behind, and some kids are going to be bored because they're ready to go ahead. So we want every kid to go at their own pace. So I would say that the fundamental difference is we're not trying to mold ourselves off of the traditional course model. We're trying to go more in a self-paced direction. But I think all of this experimentation in the space is really good for everybody.
Thank you very much, Saul. It was a real privilege for us to have you online. I really hope one day you'll be able to make it, maybe at a different period of the year. Thank you. It's great. Good luck with everything you're doing. I'm glad this is finally coming to France. The first time I wrote to you an email, you replied nearly instantly when I asked, how could we make it into the French language? So thanks again. Bye.
No, thank you. Thank you.